The shattered remains of my favorite mug lay scattered across the kitchen floor, a fitting metaphor for my life at that moment. I stood there, frozen, staring at the mess as my mind raced to process the information I'd just uncovered. "Clara? What was that noise?" Nate's voice called from the living room, snapping me out of my trance. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Nothing," I managed to croak out. "Just dropped a mug." Footsteps approached, and Nate appeared in the doorway. His brow furrowed with concern as he took in the scene. "Are you okay? You look pale." I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Instead, I focused on the shards of ceramic at my feet. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. Nate stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away instinctively, and confusion flashed across his face. "Clara, what's wrong?" The dam inside me broke. "How long?" I demanded, finally meeting his gaze. "How long what?" he asked, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. I thrust my phone at him, the incriminating email still displayed on the screen. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" Nate's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, fumbling for words. Clara, I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with some woman named Melissa, how you've been lying to me for God knows how long." "It's not what you think," Nate pleaded, reaching for me again. I stepped back, my heel crunching on a piece of broken mug. "Don't touch me," I hissed. "Just don't." The front door opened, and I heard Ava's cheerful voice. "Mom! Dad! I'm home!" Panic seized me. I couldn't let our daughter see us like this. "We'll discuss this later," I whispered fiercely to Nate. "Act normal." Nate nodded, his face a mask of guilt and fear. We both plastered on fake smiles as Ava bounded into the kitchen. "Hi, sweetie," I said, my voice unnaturally high. "How was school?" Ava's eyes widened as she noticed the broken mug. "What happened?" "Oh, just a little accident," I said, forcing a laugh. "Nothing to worry about. Why don't you go start your homework? I'll be there to help in a minute." As soon as Ava was out of earshot, I turned back to Nate. "We're not done," I warned him. "Not by a long shot." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I helped Ava with her homework, made dinner, and tucked her into bed, all while my insides churned with rage and betrayal. Finally, with Ava asleep, I confronted Nate in our bedroom. "Start talking," I demanded. Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It was a mistake, Clara, a stupid, terrible mistake." "How long?" I repeated my earlier question. He hesitated. 6 months. The words hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deceit. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't know," Nate said, his eyes pleading. "Things between us have been different lately. I felt disconnected, and Melissa was just there." I laughed humorlessly. "Oh, so it's my fault because I've been busy with work and taking care of our daughter?" "No, that's not what I meant," Nate backpedaled. "I'm not blaming you. It was all me. I made a terrible choice, and I'm so sorry." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Sorry isn't good enough, Nate. You've broken us. How am I supposed to trust you ever again?" As I stood there, staring at the man I thought I knew, I realized our life together would never be the same. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I stared at Nate across the kitchen table, my fingers wrapped tightly around my coffee mug. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words and lingering resentment. "I've been thinking," Nate said, breaking the tension. "Maybe we need a change of scenery." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I think we should move in with my parents for a while." The suggestion hit me like a bucket of ice water. "Your parents? Nate, are you serious?" "Just hear me out," he pleaded. "It could be good for us. A fresh start, away from everything." I laughed bitterly. "You mean away from your mistakes?" Nate flinched but pressed on. "Mom and Dad have that big house. We'd have our own space and they could help with Ava. It would give us time to focus on us, on rebuilding our marriage." The word marriage made my stomach churn. Was there even anything left to rebuild? "Clara," Nate said softly, reaching for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. "I know I messed up, but I want to make this work. For us, for Ava, please just consider it." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of our vows pressing down on me. "For better or for worse, right?" "Fine," I said finally. "I'll think about it." The next few days were a whirlwind of discussions and preparations. Despite my reservations, I found myself agreeing to Nate's plan. Maybe a change would do us good. Maybe his parents' presence would keep him on the straight and narrow. The day of the move arrived all too quickly. As we pulled up to Evelyn and Alfred's sprawling suburban home, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. Evelyn burst out of the front door, arms wide open. "Oh, my darlings," she cried, enveloping Nate in a hug before turning to Ava. "And there's my precious granddaughter." I hung back, watching the scene unfold. Alfred appeared in the doorway, nodding a greeting. "Clara," he said, his tone cordial but cool. "Alfred," I replied, forcing a smile. As we settled into our new living arrangement, I tried to remain optimistic. Evelyn and Alfred were polite, if a bit distant. Nate seemed more relaxed, more attentive. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But as the days turned into weeks, cracks began to appear in the facade. It started small. Evelyn forgetting to include me in meal planning, Alfred making offhand comments about my work hours, the way they'd fall silent when I entered a room, exchanging meaningful glances. One evening, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "I just don't understand what he sees in her," Evelyn's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Nate could do so much better." Now, Alfred replied. "She's the mother of our grandchild. We have to tolerate her for Ava's sake." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Tolerate me? Is that what they thought? "Clara?" Nate's voice startled me. "What are you doing?" I turned to face him, anger and hurt warring inside me. "Your parents," I hissed. "They hate me." Nate's brow furrowed. "What? No, they don't. You're imagining things." "Imagining things?" I repeated incredulously. "I just heard them talking about me. They said they have to tolerate me." "I'm sure you misunderstood," Nate said, his tone placating. "Mom and Dad love you." I stared at him, disbelief turning to fury. "Are you seriously taking their side?" "I'm not taking sides," Nate protested. "I just think you're overreacting." The word overreacting was the final straw. "You know what?" I snapped. "I'm done. This was a mistake. All of it." I stormed past him, heading for our room. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I could hear Nate following me, pleading. "Clara, please, don't do this. We can work it out." I whirled to face him, tears stinging my eyes. "Work what out, Nate? Your affair, your parents' disdain, your inability to stand up for me? Tell me, what exactly are we working out?" As I stood there, suitcase in hand, I realized I was at a crossroads. Stay and fight for a marriage that felt more like a prison, or leave and face an uncertain future. The choice I made would change everything. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of hushed voices downstairs. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back in. I was in Nate's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his old trophies and faded posters, trying to salvage a marriage that felt like it was held together by fraying threads. Sighing, I dragged myself out of bed and made my way downstairs. The voices grew clearer as I approached the kitchen. "Just don't think she's trying hard enough," Evelyn was saying. "Nate deserves better." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. Nate's response was too low for me to hear, but Evelyn's dismissive snort came through loud and clear. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The conversation stopped abruptly, 3 pairs of eyes turning to me. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. "Clara, dear," Evelyn chirped, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were just talking about you." "I heard," I replied coolly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Nate cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mom was just saying how she thinks we should all go out for dinner tonight, as a family." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what brought this on?" Alfred spoke up, his tone gruff. "We thought it might be good for you all to get out of the house. You've been cooped up here for weeks." I bit back a retort about whose idea it was for us to move in the first place. Instead, I nodded. "Sure, dinner sounds nice." The rest of the day passed in a blur of tension and forced politeness. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. As we settled into our seats, Evelyn leaned across the table. "Clara, dear, I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering for you. I know how indecisive you can be." I blinked, taken aback. "Actually, Evelyn, Oh, it's no trouble at all," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I'm sure you'll love it." I looked to Nate for support, but he was engrossed in the wine list. Ava, sensing the tension, squirmed uncomfortably in her seat. The meal progressed, each moment more excruciating than the last. Evelyn dominated the conversation, barely allowing me to get a word in edgewise. Alfred made thinly veiled comments about my parenting skills, while Nate sat in silence, avoiding eye contact. Finally, as dessert arrived, I'd had enough. "Excuse me," I said, standing abruptly. "I need some air." I rushed out of the restaurant, gulping in the cool night air. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Clara?" Nate's voice came from behind me. "Are you okay?" I whirled to face him. "Am I okay? Are you seriously asking me that?" He looked bewildered. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" I repeated incredulously. "Your parents have been insulting me all night, and you've just sat there and let it happen." Nate's face hardened. "They're trying their best, Clara. You're not exactly making it easy." I stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "So this is my fault now?" "I didn't say that," he backpedaled, "but you could try harder to get along with them." "Try harder?" I hissed. "I've been trying so hard I'm about to break, Nate, and you don't even see it." His expression softened. "Clara, please, let's not do this here." But I was beyond caring about making a scene. "No, Nate, we're doing this now. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's so clearly not." "What are you saying?" he asked, a note of fear creeping into his voice. I took a deep breath, the words I'd been holding back for weeks finally spilling out. "I'm saying that this isn't working. Moving in with your parents, trying to fix our marriage, it's all been a huge mistake." Nate's face crumpled. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. I think it's time we face the truth. Our marriage is over, Nate." As the words hung in the air between us, I realized there was no going back. The life I'd known, the future I'd planned, was crumbling around me. But amid the fear and uncertainty, I felt something else stirring, a spark of hope, a glimmer of freedom. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't live like this anymore. The days following our disastrous dinner outing blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken words. Nate and I barely spoke, tiptoeing around each other like strangers. Evelyn and Alfred's hostility, once veiled, now simmered just beneath the surface. One morning I woke to find Ava's bed empty. Panic gripped me as I rushed downstairs, only to find her giggling in the kitchen with Evelyn. "There you are, sleepyhead," Evelyn cooed, her saccharine tones setting my teeth on edge. "I was just teaching Ava how to make proper pancakes. Lord knows she needs someone to show her these things." I bit back a retort, forcing a smile for Ava's sake. "That's nice, sweetie. Why don't you go get dressed for school?" As Ava scampered off, Evelyn's demeanor changed instantly. "You know, Clara," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "it wouldn't kill you to take more interest in domestic matters. A woman should know how to keep a proper home." I felt my temper flare. "I manage just fine, Evelyn. My career doesn't make me any less of a mother or wife." She scoffed. "Does it? Because from where I'm standing, your family is falling apart." Her words hit like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Nate walked in. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. "Just fine, dear," Evelyn chirped, all sweetness again. "Clara and I were just having a little chat about family values." Nate nodded, avoiding my gaze. "Right. Well, I'm heading to work. Clara, don't forget we have that dinner with my boss tonight." I froze. "That's tonight?" "Nate, I can't. I have a deadline." "You can't cancel," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "This is important for my career." As he left, Evelyn's smug smile made my blood boil. See? A good wife would remember these things. That evening, I found myself at an upscale restaurant, seated across from Nate's boss and his wife. The conversation flowed around me as I struggled to focus, my mind still on my unfinished article. "So, Clara," Nate's boss turned to me. "Nate tells me you're a journalist, too. How's that going with family life?" Before I could answer, Nate jumped in. "Oh, Clara's thinking of scaling back her work, aren't you, honey? To focus more on home life." I stared at him, dumbfounded. What?" Nate's boss nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Family should always come first." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. As soon as we got home, I rounded on Nate. "What the hell was that about? Scaling back my work?" He sighed, loosening his tie. "Come on, Clara. You know how important this promotion is." I was just saying what he wanted to hear. "At my expense?" I hissed, mindful of Ava sleeping upstairs. "Don't be so dramatic," he scoffed. "It's not like your job is as demanding as mine anyway." I reeled back as if slapped. "Is that what you really think?" Before he could answer, Alfred appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right? We could hear you from upstairs." Nate plastered on a smile. "Just a little disagreement, Dad. Nothing to worry about." Alfred's gaze settled on me, cold and judgmental. "Clara, I think it's time you started considering what's best for this family. Your selfish behavior is tearing it apart." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. "Selfish? I've given everything to this family. I've put up with your constant criticism, your son's infidelity, all while trying to maintain my career and raise my daughter. And I'm the selfish one?" The room fell silent. Nate and Alfred stared at me, shocked. In that moment, I realized I'd reached a crossroads. I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I couldn't keep sacrificing my self-respect, my career, my happiness for a family that didn't value me. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I can't do this anymore." As I turned to leave the room, I caught sight of Ava standing on the stairs, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. My heart broke, but I knew in that moment that I had to be strong, for both of us. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: things couldn't go on as they were. It was time for a change, no matter how terrifying that prospect might be. The morning after my outburst, I woke with a sense of dread weighing heavily on my chest. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way downstairs, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. I found Nate in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, pouring myself a cup. "Yes, we do." "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Nate began. "I know things haven't been easy." "Easy?" I interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Nate, things haven't been easy since the day I found out about your affair. Living here, with your parents constantly undermining me, has been a nightmare." Nate's face hardened. "They're just trying to help, Clara. Maybe if you made more of an effort." "Don't you dare put this on me," I hissed, my anger flaring. I've been trying so hard I'm exhausted, but it's never enough, is it? Not for you, not for them." Before Nate could respond, Evelyn swept into the kitchen. "Oh, good, you're both up. Nate, dear, don't forget you promised to take your father golfing today." I stared at Nate incredulously. "Golfing? Now?" He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I forgot. Dad's been looking forward to it." "Of course he has," I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem, Clara? Surely you can handle things here for one day without my son." Something inside me snapped. "You know what, Evelyn? There is a problem. The problem is that your son and I are trying to have an important conversation about our marriage, and you're more concerned about a golf game." Evelyn's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? Nate, are you going to let her talk to me this way?" I turned to Nate, waiting to see what he would do. His eyes darted between us, panic evident on his face. "Mom, Clara, please, can't we all just calm down?" His weak attempt at peacemaking was the final straw. "No, Nate, we can't just calm down. This is our life, our marriage falling apart, and you're worried about keeping the peace?" I stormed out of the kitchen, my mind racing. As I reached the stairs, I heard Ava's small voice. "Mommy? Why is everyone yelling?" My heart clenched. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are just having a disagreement." "Are we going to have to leave?" she asked, her voice trembling. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I pulled back, looking into her worried eyes. In that moment, I knew I had to make a decision, not just for myself, but for Ava. "I don't know, honey," I said honestly, "but I promise, whatever happens, we'll be okay." As I held my daughter, I heard Nate and Evelyn's voices rising again downstairs. The constant tension, the arguments, the silent treatment, it was all taking a toll on Ava. I couldn't let this continue. With a deep breath, I made my decision. I gently pulled away from Ava. "Sweetie, can you go to your room and pack a small bag? Just some clothes and your favorite toys." Her eyes widened. "Are we going on a trip?" I forced a smile. "Something like that. Go on now, I'll be right there." As Ava scampered off, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I should have called weeks ago. "Joan? It's Clara. I need your help. Can Ava and I stay with you for a while?" My sister's voice was warm and concerned. "Of course. What's going on?" I took a shaky breath. "I'm leaving Nate. I can't do this anymore." As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of terror and relief wash over me. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. Joan's apartment felt like a sanctuary after the suffocating atmosphere at Nate's parents' house. As I sank into her plush couch, the weight of the past few months seemed to lift slightly from my shoulders. "Okay, sis," Joan said, handing me a steaming mug of tea. "Start from the beginning." I poured out everything. Nate's affair, the move to his parents' house, the constant belittling and criticism. Joan listened intently, her lawyer's mind no doubt cataloging every detail. "Clara," she said when I finished, her voice gentle but firm, "this is emotional abuse. What they've been doing to you, it's not okay." Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Abuse. I'd been so caught up in trying to make things work, I hadn't even realized. "We need to document everything," Joan continued, switching into lawyer mode. "Every insult, every manipulative comment, it'll be crucial if Nate tries to fight for custody of Ava." The mention of custody sent a chill down my spine. "You really think he'd do that?" Joan's expression hardened. "After what you've told me about his parents, we need to be prepared for anything." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into gathering evidence. I wrote down every memory of Evelyn and Alfred's mistreatment, every instance of Nate's neglect. Joan helped me organize it all, building a case that left me stunned when I saw it laid out. But even as I worked, a nagging doubt gnawed at me. Was I really ready to end my marriage, to tear apart Ava's family? My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "We need to talk. Come to the house tomorrow." I showed Joan the message, my stomach churning. "I have to go, don't I?" She nodded grimly. "Yes, but not alone. I'm coming with you." The next day, we pulled up to Nate's parents' house. My palms were sweaty as I rang the doorbell. Nate answered, his eyes widening at the sight of Joan. "What's she doing here?" he demanded. "Moral support," I said firmly, pushing past him into the house. Evelyn and Alfred were waiting in the living room, their faces masks of disapproval. "Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter-in-law," Evelyn sneered. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm here to talk about divorce proceedings, Nate, and custody arrangements for Ava." The room erupted into chaos. Nate started pleading, Evelyn shrieked about the sanctity of marriage, and Alfred thundered about ungrateful wives. Through it all, Joan stood beside me, a pillar of strength. "Enough!" I shouted, silencing the room. "I've made my decision. I won't live like this anymore, and I won't let Ava grow up in this toxic environment." Nate's face contorted with anger. "You can't take my daughter away from me. Watch me," I retorted, my voice ice cold. "I have documented evidence of the emotional abuse I've endured in this house. Do you really want to take this to court?" The color drained from Nate's face. Evelyn, however, wasn't backing down. "You ungrateful little." She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to slap me. Joan stepped between us, her voice sharp as a knife. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mrs. Thompson. Assault charges wouldn't look good in a custody battle." Evelyn recoiled, sputtering with rage. I turned to Nate, my heart pounding. "This is your last chance, Nate. Are you going to stand with your wife and daughter, or with them?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I could see the conflict in Nate's eyes, the war between the man I'd married and the son his parents had molded. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't leave my parents, Clara. They need me." In that moment I felt something inside me shatter. The last lingering hope that we could salvage our marriage crumbled to dust, but along with the pain came a surge of determination. "Then we're done," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Expect to hear from my lawyer." As Joan and I walked out of the house, I felt like I was leaving more than just a failed marriage behind. I was leaving behind years of self-doubt, of compromise, of settling for less than I deserved. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. And more importantly, I had the strength to show Ava what it meant to stand up for oneself, to demand respect and love. As we drove away, I allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. The day of the final confrontation arrived with a sense of foreboding. Joan and I had spent weeks preparing, but as we approached Nate's lawyer's office, my stomach churned with anxiety. "Remember," Joan whispered as we entered the building, You hold all the cards. Stay strong." Nate was already there, looking haggard and defeated. His eyes met mine briefly before darting away. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, eyed us coolly. "Let's get started, shall we?" she said, gesturing to the conference room. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but think of Ava, waiting at Joan's apartment with a babysitter. Everything I was about to do was for her. Nate's lawyer spoke first. "My client is willing to agree to joint custody, with Ava primarily residing with him and his parents." I felt a surge of anger. "Absolutely not," I snapped. "I have evidence of the emotional abuse I suffered in that house. Ava will not be subjected to that environment." The lawyer's eyes narrowed. "Allegations of abuse are serious, Mrs. Thompson. Do you have proof?" Joan slid a thick folder across the table. "We have documented every instance of mistreatment, corroborated by witnesses and psychological evaluations." As Nate and his lawyer pored over the documents, I saw the color drain from his face. "Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I had no idea it was this bad." I laughed bitterly. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy trying to please your parents to notice what they were doing to your wife and daughter." Nate's lawyer cleared her throat. "In light of this evidence, we're prepared to discuss a more equitable arrangement." The next few hours were a blur of negotiations. Custody arrangements, division of assets, alimony. Every detail of our lives together was dissected and divided. Through it all, I held firm, buoyed by Joan's steady presence and the memory of everything I'd endured. Finally, we reached an agreement. Primary custody of Ava would be mine, with Nate granted visitation rights. Our assets would be split fairly, and I would retain our family home. As Nate picked up the pen to sign the divorce papers, he hesitated. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry for everything. I should have protected you and Ava." For a moment I felt a flicker of the love we once shared, but then I remembered the years of neglect, of choosing his parents over his family, and my resolve hardened. "It's too late for sorry, Nate," I said quietly. "Just sign the papers." With a shaky hand, Nate signed. As I added my own signature, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. I was free. As we left the office, Joan squeezed my hand. "You did it, sis. I'm so proud of you." But our victory was short-lived. As we stepped out of the building, we were confronted by a furious Evelyn and Alfred. "You conniving witch!" Evelyn shrieked. "How dare you turn our son against us?" Alfred loomed over me, his face red with rage. "You'll regret this, Clara. We'll make sure you never see Ava again." I felt a moment of panic, but then something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up anger and frustration came pouring out. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice ringing through the street. "You will not threaten me or my daughter ever again. Your reign of manipulation and abuse ends now." I turned to Nate, who had followed us out. "This is your last chance, Nate. Your parents or your daughter. Choose." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I could see the conflict in Nate's eyes, the war between the man I'd married and the son his parents had molded. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I choose Ava." Evelyn let out a wail of despair, while Alfred's face contorted with fury, but I barely noticed them. In that moment, looking at Nate's defeated form, I realized something profound. I didn't need his choice. I didn't need his approval or his parents' acceptance. I had everything I needed: my daughter, my freedom, and my self-respect. As Joan and I walked away, leaving the chaos behind, I felt a surge of triumph. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I was ready to face it head-on. The old Clara, the one who had bent and compromised and suffered in silence, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who would fight for herself and her daughter with every breath. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning, full of possibility and hope, and I was ready for it. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when I walked away from Nate and his toxic family. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been mine, filled with hard-won victories, cherished moments with Ava, and a sense of peace I'd never known before. I was in the middle of preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Ava, now a spirited 13-year-old, called out, "I'll get it, Mom." A moment later, I heard her startled voice. "Dad?" My blood ran cold. I rushed to the door, wiping my hands on my apron. There stood Nate, a shadow of his former self. His clothes were disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and he reeked of alcohol. Clara, he slurred, swaying slightly, I need your help. I instinctively stepped in front of Ava, shielding her. Nate, what are you doing here? He stumbled forward and I held up a hand to stop him. Please, he begged. I've lost everything. My job, my savings. Even Mom and Dad have cut me off. I didn't know where else to go. A part of me, the part that had once loved this man, ached to help him. But I remembered the years of neglect, the pain he'd put me through, and I steeled myself. Ava, honey, I said calmly, go to your room, please. Once Ava was out of earshot, I turned back to Nate. You can't be here, I said firmly. You're drunk and you're scaring our daughter. Our daughter, he repeated bitterly, the one you took from me. Anger flared within me. I didn't take her from you, Nate. You chose to let her go when you refused to stand up to your parents. He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. You ruined my life, he shouted. For a moment, fear gripped me, but then something shifted. I was no longer the woman who would cower or make excuses for him. I was stronger now. With a swift motion, I broke free of his grip and pushed him back. No, Nate, I said, my voice steady and strong. You ruined your own life, and I won't let you ruin mine or Ava's any longer. I saw a flicker of the old Nate in his eyes, shame, regret, and a hint of admiration. But it was too late for that now. I'm calling you a cab, I said. And then I'm calling my lawyer. This ends now, Nate. No more surprise visits, no more manipulations. If you want to see Ava, you'll do it through proper channels, and you'll do it sober. As I dialed the cab company, I felt a presence behind me. Ava stood there, her eyes wide but determined. Is Dad okay? She asked softly. I knelt down to her level, my heart swelling with love and pride for this brave, compassionate girl. He's going through a tough time, sweetie, but that's not our responsibility anymore. We're going to be okay. As we watched the cab drive away with Nate, I felt a profound sense of closure. The last lingering threads of my old life had been severed, and the future stretched out before us, bright and full of possibility. Later that night, as Ava slept peacefully, I sat on our porch, sipping tea and reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had all shaped me into the woman I was now. I thought of the women out there who might be where I was 5 years ago, trapped, afraid, doubting themselves. I wished I could tell them that there was hope, that they were stronger than they knew. As the stars twinkled above, I made a silent vow. I would use my voice, my experiences, to help others find their strength. My story wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving, about reclaiming one's power and dignity. Tomorrow, I decided I would start writing again. Not just articles, but a book. My story, raw and honest, a beacon of hope for others. The cool night breeze caressed my face, and I smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautifully, wonderfully mine. And for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future held. As I headed back inside, I paused at Ava's room, watching her sleep. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. For her, for me, for the life we'd built together. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new chapter, brimming with hope, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that we were going to be more than okay. We were going to be extraordinary. The slamming of the front door jolts me from my thoughts. Ethan storms into the living room, his face contorted with anger. "Where the hell have you been?" he demands, his voice dripping with accusation. "I was volunteering at the youth center," I reply calmly, trying to diffuse the situation. "You know how much it means to me." "Oh, spare me the sob story, Vivian," Ethan scoffs. "You're supposed to be here, supporting me and my career. Instead, you're off playing saint to a bunch of delinquents." His words sting, but I refuse to let him see how much they hurt. They're not delinquents, Ethan. They're kids who need guidance and support. "What they need is discipline and a swift kick in the ass," he retorts. "And what I need is a wife who understands her role." I feel my blood boil at his condescending tone. My role? And what exactly is that, Ethan? To be your trophy wife? To sit at home and wait for you to grace me with your presence? "Don't be so dramatic," he sneers. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me. I'm on the fast track to partner, and I need a wife who can keep up appearances." "Appearances?" I echo, disbelief coloring my voice. "Is that all our marriage is to you? A facade to impress your colleagues?" Ethan steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "Watch your tone, Vivian. Remember who pays the bills around here." The threat hangs heavy in the air, and I feel a chill run down my spine. Are you seriously going to hold that over my head? I gave up my job to move here for you, Ethan. I've sacrificed everything for this marriage. Sacrificed? He laughs humorlessly. You call sitting around all day, spending my money a sacrifice? You should be grateful for the life I've given you. Tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blink them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I am grateful, Ethan, but I'm also suffocating. I feel like I'm losing myself in this marriage. Then maybe you should find yourself a new hobby, he suggests coldly, one that doesn't involve neglecting your duties as my wife. And what about your duties as my husband? I counter, my voice rising. When was the last time you even asked about my day, or showed any interest in my life? Ethan's jaw clenches, and for a moment I think he might actually hear me. But then he shakes his head, his expression hardening. I don't have time for this, Vivian. I have a career to focus on. If you can't handle that, then maybe we need to reevaluate this marriage. With that, he turns on his heel and stalks out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart in pieces. I sink onto the couch, my mind reeling. How did we get here? How did the man I fell in love with turn into this cold, calculating stranger? I think back to the early days of our relationship, when Ethan was attentive and loving. We met at a charity event, both passionate about making a difference in the world. He swept me off my feet with his charm and ambition, and within a year we were married. But somewhere along the way, his career took precedence over everything else. And now, I'm left wondering if there's anything left of the marriage I thought we had. 2 years into our marriage, Ethan comes home with a bombshell announcement. I've been offered a partnership at a law firm in Los Angeles, he declares, a triumphant grin on his face. I stare at him, my heart sinking. Los Angeles? But what about my job, Ethan? My students? Come on, Vivian, he cajoles. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You can always find another teaching job in L.A. It's not that simple, I argue, my voice strained. I've built a life here, Ethan. I have roots in this community. Ethan's smile fades, replaced by a look of annoyance. I thought you'd be happy for me, Vivian. This is a huge step up for us. For you, maybe, I counter. But what about what I want? What about my dreams? Dreams? He scoffs. You're a high school teacher, Vivian. How far do you think that's going to take you? His words cut deep, and I feel my eyes sting with tears. I can't believe you just said that. Teaching is my passion, Ethan. It's not just a job to me. Ethan sighs, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't mean it like that, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Vivian. We can't pass it up. I know he's right, but the thought of leaving everything behind feels like a knife twisting in my gut. Fine. I relent, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll take a sabbatical from teaching. Ethan's face lights up, and he pulls me into a hug. You won't regret this, Vivian. I promise. But as we pack up our life and prepare for the move, I can't shake the feeling that I'm making a terrible mistake. The day of the move arrives, and I find myself surrounded by boxes, my childhood home stripped bare. As I carefully wrap a framed photo of my parents, Ethan walks in, a look of disdain on his face. You're not seriously bringing that old junk, are you? He asks, eyeing the sentimental items I've carefully packed. They're not junk, Ethan, I defend, my voice tight. They're memories, pieces of my history. We're starting a new life, Vivian, he reminds me, his tone condescending. We don't need to drag the past along with us. I bite my tongue, not wanting to argue. But as I watch Ethan carelessly toss my treasured possessions aside, I feel a piece of myself crumble. We arrive in Los Angeles, and Ethan ushers me into our new home, a sleek, modern, high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Isn't it perfect? He gushes, his eyes alight with excitement. I force a smile, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. It's lovely, Ethan. He wraps an arm around my waist, pulling me close. This is just the beginning, Vivian. I'm going to give you the life you've always dreamed of. But as I stare out at the unfamiliar skyline, I can't help but wonder if the life I've always dreamed of is the one I'm leaving behind. 6 months pass in a blur of cocktail parties and corporate dinners, Ethan's new role consuming his every waking moment. I find solace in volunteering at a local youth center, pouring my heart into mentoring troubled teens. But one evening, as I'm getting ready for a fundraiser, Ethan barges into the bedroom, his face twisted with rage. "Are you seriously wearing that?" he demands, eyeing my simple black dress with disdain. "What's wrong with it?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. "You look like a damn schoolmarm," he sneers. "I need you to look the part of a successful lawyer's wife, not some frumpy volunteer." Tears sting my eyes, but I blink them back, refusing to let him see how much his words hurt. "I'll change," I mumble, turning away. But as I slip into a designer gown and plaster on a fake smile, I can't shake the feeling that I'm slowly losing myself, piece by piece. 6 months into our new life in Los Angeles, Ethan's behavior takes a turn for the worse. He becomes increasingly distant and irritable, the stress of his demanding job taking a toll on our already strained relationship. I find solace in volunteering at the youth center, pouring my heart into mentoring the kids who have come to rely on me. But one evening, as I'm preparing to leave for a fundraising event, Ethan storms into the room, his face contorted with anger. "Where do you think you're going?" he demands, his voice dripping with disdain. "To the youth center fundraiser," I reply, my heart sinking at the sight of his rage. "I told you about it weeks ago. And I told you to prioritize our social obligations," he snaps. "You're supposed to be at the law firm dinner with me tonight." "I can't just abandon the kids, Ethan," I plead. "They're counting on me." "I'm counting on you," he roars, slamming his hand against the wall. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a wife who'd rather spend her time with a bunch of delinquents than support her husband's career?" Tears sting my eyes, but I refuse to let them fall. "They're not delinquents, Ethan. They're good kids who just need someone to believe in them." "Believe in them?" he scoffs. "They're a lost cause, Vivian. Just like you'll be if you don't start prioritizing what's important." His words cut deep, but I stand my ground. I am prioritizing what's important, Ethan. Those kids need me. "And what about what I need?" he demands, his voice low and menacing. "What about the sacrifices I've made for this family?" "Sacrifices?" I echo, disbelief coloring my tone. "You've been so focused on your career that you've barely even noticed me these past few months." "Oh, I've noticed," he sneers. "I've noticed how you've let yourself go, how you'd rather wallow in self-pity than be the wife I need you to be." I reel back as if he slapped me, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "How can you say that?" I whisper, my voice trembling. "I've given up everything for you, Ethan. My job, my home, my entire life." "And now you'll give up this ridiculous volunteering," he demands, "or I'll cut off your access to our joint bank account." I stare at him in shock, unable to believe what I'm hearing. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he says, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "I'm done indulging your little charity projects, Vivian. It's time for you to fall in line." With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, leaving me to collapse onto the bed, my body shaking with silent sobs. I feel trapped, suffocated by the weight of Ethan's expectations and the life I've found myself in. Over the next few weeks, I try to be the wife Ethan wants me to be. I attend his work functions, plastering on a fake smile and pretending to be the perfect corporate spouse. But inside, I'm dying a little more each day. I long for the fulfillment I once found in teaching, for the sense of purpose that volunteering at the youth center brought me. But every time I try to broach the subject with Ethan, he shuts me down, reminding me of my place in his life. One night, as we're getting ready for yet another work dinner, I finally muster up the courage to confront him. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," I say, my voice shaking. "I'm miserable. I feel like I'm losing myself." He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You're not losing yourself, Vivian. You're finding your place in this world, and that place is by my side, supporting my career." "But what about my career?" I plead. "What about my dreams?" "Dreams," he scoffs. "Grow up, Vivian. It's time to face reality. This is your life now, and the sooner you accept that, the better off we'll both be." I feel something break inside of me, the last shred of hope I'd been clinging to shattering into dust. And as I follow Ethan out the door, my heart heavy with despair, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever find my way back to the person I used to be. As the months drag on, the distance between Ethan and I grows wider with each passing day. I long for the connection we once shared, for the love that brought us together in the first place. And so one evening, I muster up the courage to broach the subject that's been weighing on my heart. "Ethan," I say softly, my voice trembling, I've been thinking about starting a family. He looks up from his laptop, his eyes narrowing. A family? Now? Are you out of your mind, Vivian? His harsh tone catches me off guard, and I feel my heart sink. I just thought, with your career taking off and us settling into our new life here. Settling into our new life, he scoffs. I'm barely keeping my head above water at work, and you want to add a baby to the mix? But I thought you wanted children, I whisper, my voice barely audible. Maybe someday, he says dismissively, but not now, Vivian. I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility. His words cut deep, and I feel a piece of my dream for our future crumble. But I refuse to let him see how much he's hurt me. Instead, I force a smile and nod. Of course. You're right. It was a silly idea. Ethan returns to his work, and I'm left alone with my thoughts, my heart heavy with the weight of his rejection. In an attempt to find some semblance of purpose, I take a part-time job at a bookstore. At first, Ethan seems supportive, even happy that I'm getting out of the house. But as the weeks pass, his attitude begins to change. I don't like you spending so much time away from home, he grumbles one evening as I'm getting ready for my shift. It's just a few hours a week, Ethan, I remind him gently. And I thought you wanted me to find something to keep me busy. I wanted you to find a hobby, not a job, he retorts. What's next? You'll be neglecting your duties at home to pursue some silly career? I bristle at his words, my temper flaring. My duties at home? You mean waiting on you hand and foot, catering to your every whim? Watch your tone, Vivian, he warns, his eyes flashing with anger. I take a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I'm sorry, Ethan, I didn't mean to snap. I need something for myself, something that makes me feel valued. For a moment, his expression softens, and I think he might actually understand, but then he shakes his head, his jaw clenching. Fine. Do what you want, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. I leave for my shift with a heavy heart, wondering if I'll ever be able to find happiness in this new life we've built. A few days later, on a whim, Ethan and I buy lottery tickets. As we sit at the kitchen table, scratching off the numbers, I can't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be our lucky break. But as the weeks pass and the drawing comes and goes, our tickets prove to be just another disappointment. Ethan barely seems to notice, too caught up in his own world to care about my foolish dreams. And then, just when I think things can't get any worse, Ethan comes home with news that turns my world upside down. I got a promotion, he announces, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. For a moment, I allow myself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe this will be the thing that finally brings us back together, that reignites the spark we once shared. But as the days turn into weeks, Ethan's behavior only worsens. He becomes more demanding, more critical of my every move. Nothing I do seems to be good enough, and I find myself walking on eggshells, desperate to avoid his wrath. Late one night, as I lie awake in bed, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, I can't help but wonder how we got here, how the man I once loved could have turned into such a monster. And as I stare up at the ceiling, my heart heavy with the weight of my own misery, I know one thing for certain. Something has to change. I can't keep living like this. I just don't know how much more I can take. Ethan's promotion seems to have only fueled his ego, and his treatment of me reaches new lows. One evening, he comes home late from work, reeking of alcohol and expensive perfume. "Where have you been?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out with clients," he slurs, stumbling into the living room. "Not that it's any of your business." I feel a flare of anger at his dismissive tone. "It is my business, Ethan. I'm your wife." He laughs, a cruel, mocking sound. "Wife? Please. You're nothing but a burden, Vivian, a millstone around my neck." His words hit me like a physical blow, and I reel back, my eyes stinging with tears. "How can you say that? After everything I've done for you, for our marriage." "What have you done exactly?" he sneers. "Quit your job? Abandoned your friends? Moved across the country for me? You should be thanking me for giving you a purpose in life." I shake my head in disbelief, unable to comprehend the venom in his voice. "A purpose? You've taken everything from me, Ethan. My career, my dreams, my sense of self-worth." "Oh, spare me the pity party," he scoffs. "You're just jealous of my success. Jealous that I've made something of myself while you've been content to sit at home and play the martyr." "Jealous?" I echo, my voice rising. I'm not jealous of your success, Ethan. I'm disgusted by what it's turned you into. He takes a step towards me, his eyes flashing with anger. Watch yourself, Vivian. You don't want to push me too far. But I'm too far gone to heed his warning. Or what? You'll leave me? Go ahead. I'd rather be alone than spend another minute with a man who treats me like dirt. For a moment he looks stunned, as if he can't believe I've dared to stand up to him. But then his face twists into a sneer, and he leans in close, his breath hot against my cheek. You're nothing without me, Vivian. Nothing. And if you even think about leaving, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, leaving me trembling in his wake. I sink onto the couch, my head in my hands, and let the tears come. How did I let things get this bad? How did I let myself become so weak, so dependent on a man who clearly doesn't love me? As I sit there, lost in my own misery, my phone buzzes with an incoming text. I glance at the screen, expecting to see a message from Ethan, but instead, I find myself staring at a name I don't recognize. Natalie. My heart stops. Who is Natalie? And why is she texting my husband at this hour of the night? With shaking hands, I open the message, my eyes widening as I read the words on the screen. I had a great time tonight, Ethan. Can't wait to see you again soon. XOXO. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. Ethan is cheating on me. The late nights, the distant behavior, the cruel words. It all makes sense now. I confront him the moment he walks through the door, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. Who is Natalie, Ethan? And don't you dare lie to me. He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. She's a colleague, a friend. Not that it's any of your business. A friend, I echo, my voice rising. Since when do friends send flirty texts in the middle of the night? His face hardens, and he takes a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. You went through my phone. How dare you? How dare I? I shout, my temper flaring. How dare you cheat on me, Ethan? How dare you treat me like garbage while you're off screwing some other woman? I want a divorce, he says flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. I'm done with this marriage, Vivian. Done with you. His words hit me like a physical blow, and I stumble back, my vision blurring with tears. But even through the pain, I feel a flicker of something else. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. And as I stand there, watching the man I once loved walk away from me, I make a vow to myself. I will make him pay for what he's done. I will make him suffer the way he's made me suffer. And I know just how to do it. Ethan's betrayal cuts deep, but I refuse to let him see how much he's hurt me. Instead, I channel my pain into planning my revenge. And the first step is to gather evidence of his infidelity. I hire a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Maria who assures me she'll get the proof I need. And sure enough, within a week, she presents me with a stack of photos and recordings that leave no doubt about Ethan's affair. I confront him with the evidence, my heart pounding in my chest as I watch the color drain from his face. How could you do this to me, Ethan? I ask, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. How could you throw away everything we had for some cheap fling? He looks at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. Don't be so dramatic, Vivian. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. His callousness takes my breath away, and I feel a wave of nausea wash over me. Just sex? Is that all our marriage was to you? Just a convenient arrangement until something better came along? He shrugs, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. What can I say? I got bored. And Natalie, well, she knows how to keep things interesting. I shake my head in disbelief, unable to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. You disgust me, Ethan. You're nothing but a selfish, manipulative bastard. And you're a pathetic, clingy little girl who can't accept that her husband has outgrown her, he sneers. Face it, Vivian, you were never enough for me. You never will be. His words hit me like a physical blow, and I reel back, my eyes stinging with tears. But I refuse to let him see me cry. Not anymore. Get out, I whisper, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house and out of my life. I never want to see you again. He laughs, a harsh, mocking sound that echoes through the room. Gladly. But don't think you're going to get a dime from me in the divorce. I'll make sure you end up with nothing, Vivian. Nothing. With that, he turns on his heel and storms out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sink to the floor, my body shaking with silent sobs as the reality of what's just happened washes over me. but even through the pain, I feel a flicker of something else. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope, because I know something Ethan doesn't. Something that will change everything. I've won the lottery. 2 weeks ago, on a whim, I bought a ticket for the Powerball jackpot, and against all odds, I hit the jackpot. $10 million, all mine. I've kept the news to myself, not wanting to give Ethan any reason to suspect that I might be planning something. But now, as I sit on the floor of our once-shared home, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make Ethan pay for what he's done. I'm going to hit him where it hurts the most, his wallet. I hire the best divorce attorney in town, a shark named Jack, who assures me he'll make sure I get everything I'm entitled to. And with the evidence of Ethan's infidelity on my side, he tells me I have a strong case for a generous settlement. But I don't want Ethan's money. I want to make him suffer. I want to watch him squirm as he realizes just how much he's underestimated me. And so, on the day of our divorce hearing, I walk into the courtroom with my head held high, my lottery ticket tucked safely in my purse. I watch as Ethan smirks at me from across the room, confident that he's going to walk away with everything. But then I take the stand, and I tell the judge everything. I tell him about Ethan's affair, about his cruel treatment of me throughout our marriage. And then, with a triumphant smile, I pull out my lottery ticket and hold it up for the world to see. I don't want a dime from this man, Your Honor, I say, my voice ringing out clear and strong. I have all the money I need, and then some. All I want is my freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that Ethan will never be able to hurt me again. The look on Ethan's face as the judge grants me a divorce and orders him to pay my legal fees is one I'll never forget. And as I walk out of the courtroom, my head held high and my heart finally free, I know that I've won. Not just the lottery, but my life back. And that's a prize worth more than all the money in the world. With the divorce finalized and my lottery winnings secure, I feel a sense of freedom I haven't known in years. But even as I revel in my newfound independence, I can't shake the desire to make Ethan pay for what he's done. And so I set my plan into motion. I know that Ethan's law firm handles high-profile clients, including several major banks in the city. And I also know that he's been angling for a promotion to senior partner, a position that would put him in charge of managing those accounts. So I decide to hit him where it hurts. His reputation. I make an appointment at Ethan's bank, the same one he's been schmoozing with for months in the hopes of landing their business. And when I walk in, dressed to the nines and carrying a briefcase full of cash, I make sure everyone knows exactly who I am. I'd like to make a deposit, I say, my voice ringing out loud and clear across the lobby. $10 million, to be exact. The teller's eyes widen, and I can see the wheels turning in her head as she tries to figure out who I am and where I got such a large sum of money. Of course, ma'am, she stammers, ushering me into a private room. We'll just need to verify the funds and fill out some paperwork. I smile, settling into a chair and crossing my legs. Take your time. I've got all day. As the teller scurries off to get her manager, I lean back and savor the moment. I can only imagine the look on Ethan's face when he finds out that his ex-wife, the woman he thought he'd broken, is now one of the bank's most valued clients. And sure enough, within minutes, the bank manager is falling all over himself to accommodate me. He offers me everything from a personal financial advisor to a VIP lounge pass, all the while assuring me that my money is in good hands. I just smile and nod, playing the part of the gracious client. But inside, I'm counting down the seconds until Ethan walks through that door. And when he finally does, his face a mask of shock and anger, I know I've won. "Vivian," he hisses, his eyes darting around the room as if he's afraid someone might overhear. "What the hell are you doing here?" I smile, my voice sweet as honey. "Just making a little deposit, darling. I thought you'd be happy to see me supporting your bank." His face turns red, and I can see the veins in his neck bulging with barely contained rage. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Trying to humiliate me in front of my clients?" I shrug, my eyes wide with feigned innocence. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Ethan. I'm just a satisfied customer, here to do business with the best bank in town." He takes a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. "You little bitch, you think you're so clever, don't you? Well, Let me tell you something. You may have won the lottery, but you're still nothing, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." But before he can say another word, the bank manager clears his throat, his voice nervous but firm. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't tolerate that kind of language or behavior towards our clients." Ethan's face goes white, and I can see the panic in his eyes as he realizes the gravity of the situation. He's just insulted and threatened a high-value client in front of his boss, and there's no way he's going to come out of this unscathed. I apologize," he stammers, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean—" But it's too late. The damage is done, and as he's escorted out of the room by security, his head hanging in shame, I feel a rush of triumph that's almost intoxicating. I've hit Ethan where it hurts the most, his ego, and I know that this is just the beginning. He may have taken everything from me, but now I'm the one holding all the cards, and I'm going to make damn sure he never forgets it. News of Ethan's outburst at the bank spreads like wildfire, and within days he's facing disciplinary action from his firm. His clients start to pull their accounts, and his once promising career begins to crumble before his eyes. I watch from afar, savoring every moment of his downfall. But even as I revel in my revenge, I can't help but feel a twinge of something else, something that feels suspiciously like regret. And then one day I receive a phone call that changes everything. "Vivian?" Ethan's voice is weak, broken. "I need to see you, please." I hesitate, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wants to hang up, to leave him to wallow in his own misery, but another part of me, the part that once loved him, can't resist the plea in his voice. "Fine," I say, my voice cold, "but make it quick." We meet at a coffee shop near my old apartment, a place we used to frequent in happier times. Ethan looks like a shell of his former self, his eyes bloodshot and his skin pale. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "for everything. I know I can't take back what I did, but I need you to know that I'm truly deeply sorry." I stare at him, my heart twisting in my chest. I want to believe him, to forgive him, but I can't. Not after everything he's put me through. "It's too late, Ethan," I say, my voice trembling. "You had your chance, and you blew it. I'm done being your punching bag." He nods, his eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm going to get help. I'm going to be a better man, even if it's too late for us." I feel a lump rising in my throat, and I swallow hard. "I hope you do, Ethan, for your sake and for the sake of anyone else who might cross your path." He looks at me, his eyes searching mine. "What about you, Vivian? What are you going to do now?" I take a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. And then, suddenly, I know exactly what I want to do. "I'm going to start a foundation," I say, my voice growing stronger with each word. "A foundation that helps women like me, women who have been beaten down and broken by men like you. I'm going to use my money to make a difference, to help others find their strength and their voice." Ethan stares at me, his eyes wide with surprise. That's amazing, Vivian. I'm proud of you." I nod, my heart swelling with pride. "I'm proud of me too, Ethan, and I'm done letting you or anyone else dictate my worth." We part ways soon after, and as I walk out of the coffee shop, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. I know that I'll never forget what Ethan did to me, but I also know that I'm stronger because of it. And as I set to work on my foundation, pouring my heart and soul into helping other women find their power, I realize that this is what I was meant to do all along. I may have started out as a victim, but now I'm a survivor, and I'm going to make damn sure that no one ever forgets it. Months turn into years, and as my foundation grows and thrives, I find myself back in my hometown, teaching at the same high school where I started my career. I'm happy now, truly happy. I've found my purpose, my calling, and I know that everything I went through, every moment of pain and heartbreak was worth it to get me to where I am today. I may not have the perfect life, but I have a life that's all my own. And that's more than enough for me. As I stand in front of my classroom, looking out at the eager faces of my students, I can't help but smile. I know that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do, and no one, not even Ethan, can take that away from me.